Hey guys, welcome to Night of Impact. I'm so excited to be a part of this. And man, 2020 has just been nuts. And I know it's been crazy, but I feel like, for me, I feel like we're turning a corner where, we're no longer afraid to die, but we're asking the question, God, what now? And it's nice to not be afraid to die. My boys, I don't know if you're parents, but when you have kids, you realize what it looks like to not be afraid to die, and it's scary. Every day, my boys, it's like they wake up trying to figure out how to cheat death, And when they became a Christian, it almost became worse because now they knew about heaven. They're like, Dad, if I die, I'm going to heaven. At one point, my older son was a believer, and I remember him talking to his younger brother who was not a Christian. He's like, you can't run in the street. You can't do that because you're going to go to hell. And so I had to sit them down. And I remember we had to have this family conversation. And I said, boys, listen, you're right. You guys know Jesus. You've trusted him. If you die, you don't need to be afraid to die. You'll go to heaven when you die. But here's why God wants you alive on this planet. And they said, why? I said, all the people that we talk about around the world who still haven't heard about Jesus yet? They're like, yeah. I said, if every Christian just, dies and goes to heaven, who's going to be left to tell the world? And I think it was the first time they realized, man, there was a reason God had them here. There's a reason why I baptized them and then brought them back up out of the water, because God left them here with something to do. And I knew that, they didn't need to not be afraid of death. They needed a reason to live. And, I think what's tragic about adults is we stop asking the question that my kids were asking, which is really the question, why am I here? God, why am I here on the planet? What have you put me here to do? If God were to erase you out of the story right now, what would go undone? What chapter would go unwritten? What song, would go unsung if you were no longer here? We stop asking the question, God, why am I here? And, you might know Jesus and you think you're ready to die, but if you don't know your purpose in life, you're not ready to live. And listen, the world has no answer for this. The world has no answer to give you. This is why the stock market is doing this, because nobody knows what's next and nobody knows what to do. And the reason why all the things that the world offers you can't satisfy you, money, success, all that stuff, is because none of that stuff lasts forever, but you will. You're going to last forever. And if you last forever, you need a story to live in that lasts forever. And the only story that lasts forever comes from an author who lasts forever. Listen, God has something he has left us here to do. And in the middle of all this chaos, the thing that I've been saying to get me through is, you know what? I'm going to lean into the story that ends with no disease. I'm going to lean into the story that ends with no suffering. I'm going to lean into the one story that ends with no racism, with people from every tribe, every tongue, every nation. That's the story we all want, but only God knows how to get there. One of the verses that I hang on to that talks about why God has us here is in Psalms, in the middle of your Bible, Psalm 67. And verses 1 and 2 say this: God bless us, be gracious to us and bless us. Cause your face to shine upon us. Isn't that awesome? I mean, we want God to bless us. I think God has blessed us. Even in the middle of all this chaos, man, God has blessed us. And if you're alive, you're watching this right now, you made it. You made it through some of the chaos. God's blessed you. But it says, God bless us so that your ways may be known on the earth. In other words, there is a purpose, a mission in this world that's attached to this blessing that God's given you. May your ways be known on the earth, your salvation among all nations. Listen, you can't find anything greater to give your life to. God is saying, I want to bless you, but I want you to be a blessing to the world, an eternal salvation blessing. It's a great life mission because it lasts forever. Show me something else you can give your life to right now that's going to last forever. One of the things that's rocked our world is everything we thought was sure was shaken, but God's story is going to last forever. And you can not only be a blessing to the world with something like food, water, all those things. You can be a blessing to the world that is salvation. It's salvation that's going to last forever. But it also says, I want your ways to be known on the earth, your salvation, not just in a few nations, but among all the nations. It's global. God is not looking to save one race, one culture, one people group, one nationality. God's global. Find something bigger to give your life to than eternal and global. And this mission of God not only has to do with all time and all peoples, but it's through all the Bible. You know, I didn't realize this. I'd studied the Bible. I've been a Christian for a long time. I went to Dallas Theological Seminary, but I missed the story. This idea that we are blessed to be a blessing comes from all the way back in Genesis, where God says to Abraham, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make your name great, and you will be a blessing, and all the nations on the earth will be blessed through you. Do you know God said that in the very beginning of the story? Jesus, the last thing he tells his disciples is to go make disciples of all the nations of the earth. God's on this global mission, and that's why he's left us here. And when we get to the end of God's story, in heaven, in Revelation 7:9, there are going to be people from every culture, every race, every people group in harmony, worshiping the one true God. People from every nation, every tribe, every tongue. That's the story we want, but we're not there yet. I remember when I was in college and my friend was going on a mission trip and he was raising money. I was like, you know, I don't get what you're doing, you know, because I said, I know plenty of lost people. And I'm like the only white guy in my neighborhood, you know, so I know plenty of people from other countries, and I know plenty of lost people. Why are you raising all this money to go to some other place? And he said, Claude, you know, that's the problem though. You know them. And he said, there's, in the world, 5 out of 6 people who are lost don't have someone like you in their culture. And I said, what do you mean? He said, 5 out of 6 lost people on planet Earth, they live within a people group or a language or a country where they don't have a Christian in their neighborhood. They're not going to buy Starbucks, you know, in line with a Christian behind them. They're not going to work in a cubicle next to a Christian. They're not going to drive in traffic next to a Christian. 5 out of 6 lost people on planet Earth are relationally disconnected from the gospel unless something changes, unless somebody moves. And it's the first time I understood there's a difference between people who were unsaved and what he was talking about, people in the world who were unreached. And I found out there were over 3 billion people in places like North Africa, the Middle East, India, China, over 3 billion people who still had no access to the gospel. And I thought, well, man, is that a problem with them? You know, I used to think, well, maybe that's a problem with them because they're Buddhists, they're Muslim, they don't want to hear about Jesus. And I realized it's not really a problem that's over there, it's a problem that's here. Out of all the missionaries that we do send, only 4% of missionaries go to those people. Out of all the blessing that God has given the church, if we took all the financial resources that God's blessed the church with, and it was represented by, you know, Mount Everest, what is given to reach those people in missions to the unreached, if all we have is Mount Everest, you'd have to zoom in just to see the Statue of Liberty, then you'd have to zoom in again to see her toe, and then you'd have to zoom into the curb, and you'd have to make a mark halfway up the curb, because that's how much the church gives to reach the unreached people of the world. God has blessed us to be a blessing, and we've kept it. Now, I work with an organization with students, and for the last 20 years, I've seen God do some incredible stuff. He's raising up a generation of young people to go. And many of them are excited, and we need more people to go, but we have people that want to go. One of the things that keeps them from being able to go is, how are they going to be sent? How are they going to be funded? Paul says in Romans 10, how are the people in the world going to hear unless someone preaches to them? But how can they preach unless they are sent? In other words, a friend of mine said this to me. He goes, Claude, every arrow needs a bow. We need a bow. We need a stronger bow. And what I love about what the Go Fund is doing is they're saying, man, you know what? We need a stronger bow to finish this. One of the things my family's been doing in the middle of the pandemic is we've just been rewatching some great movies. We've been rewatching The Lord of the Rings. We've been rewatching The Hobbit and the story, you know, of J.R. Tolkien. And I love what the movies do that kind of deviate from the books a little bit. A lot of times they kind of make things a little bigger, a little better. And you know, when you get to the end of The Hobbit, where Smaug is, you know, circling the city, Bard, the bowsman, he has this arrow. And, you know, Peter Jackson says, you know, what kind of arrow is going to take down a dragon? Well, it's not this little arrow. It's this big, black, forged, in the mines of old, steel arrow that's 8 feet long. And so if you're going to send an arrow like that to take down a dragon, you need a bigger bow. And so Peter Jackson doesn't picture this little Cupid, bow, but they build this thing in the movie called the Wind Lance. And it's this massive bow, and as smog descends on the city and is setting the city on fire, the first thing he does is he takes out the bow. And as Bard is up there with the arrow, he looks around and smog's circling back. And when the camera pans back to him, his son has climbed up this tower, and his son is standing there, and literally his son has become the bow. And in this moment that we're in, where it feels like the city's burning, and it feels like the dragon's about to win, God is saying, man, I got one last black arrow called Jesus Christ to send to the world, but I need a strong bow. I need you to become the bow. Why are you here? Why has God put you on planet Earth? Right here, between Jude and Revelation, you get to be alive. You get to be alive in the middle of this story. And God is saying, you know what? It may look like everything is falling apart. It may look like the city's burning and the dragon may be turning for this final, entrance into the city. But I've left something in the church for you, and I want you to become the arrow and the bow. This is why God's left you here on the planet. God's not erasing people out of the story. He's inviting you into the story. And listen to me, the only reason death is your enemy is because death might steal you away from this story. If angels had the opportunity to become the arrow and the bow of God and His mission in the world, heaven would empty in half an hour. God's left you here, but why? Why does God have you here? And what's He inviting you to do in His story?